Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. First off, I just want to quickly address the Fuji X-H2S that I did a rumor roundup video on a couple of weeks ago. It was announced on May 31st as expected, and actually pretty much all of the rumors that I had spoken about came true. We actually even got some more cool stuff that I didn't mention in the video, like ProRes internal and ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW external. We did get the 6K video, and we even got pretty much unlimited 4K 120. If you use the fan attachment, it'll go as long as the battery lasts and longer if you change the battery. If you don't use the fan attachment, you can still get 50 minutes out of it. Plus you get unlimited 4K 30 and 60. But the 6K 30, it's definitely good to have. Now all the people that have gotten their hands on it so far are using pre-release models with pre-release firmware. So there are definitely some bugs. Now autofocus isn't quite where we want it to be. It's definitely not on par with Canon and Sony yet, but perhaps it'll improve by the actual release. And IBIS isn't quite perfect, and the boost IBIS apparently wanders a little bit. But again, pre-release, so we'll see how it goes. Today, however, I want to do another rumor roundup, and this time we're going to talk about Apple's WWDC event, which is going to be happening next Monday, June 6th. So, roll intro. And let's get started. So first off, if you don't know what WWDC is, that's the Worldwide Developers Conference. Apple holds it every year, usually a little bit before summer. So this time it's going to be taking place from June 6th to June 10th. Not only will there be developer workshops, but the main thing that we're looking at is WWDC is where Apple typically announces most of their OS updates and occasionally releases some new hardware. This year, we're going to be looking at iOS 16 / iPadOS 16, as well as macOS 13, watchOS 9, and tvOS 16. I'm going to cover the rumors on each of these areas separately, except for tvOS, because I've never used or had an Apple TV, so it wouldn't really make any sense for me to talk about that one. As with my last rumor roundup video, I do want to credit my sources up front. So this time I used techradar.com, macrumors.com, and techadvisor.com. Again, I don't know where they got their sources, so I can't speak to exactly where the rumors started. However, I just want to make sure that I credit the people that I read articles from and aggregated this content from. So let's start with macOS 13. Now every year since 2013, when Apple released macOS Mavericks, every OS update has been named after a landmark in California. So this year we're thinking that it might be Mammoth because Apple trademarked macOS Mammoth at the same time that they trademarked macOS Monterey early last year, 2021. Now, as far as the actual OS goes, there's not a ton on this right now. Typically, macOS gets some of the upgrades that iOS got previously, just a little bit late and kind of a trickle down. So previously, the iPhone got dark mode, and then the iPad got dark mode, and then the Mac got dark mode in Mojave, I believe. This time, we might be seeing widgets appearing on the desktop rather than in a separate bar, similar to how they are available now in iOS. As well, there could be an upgraded weather app since Apple bought Dark Sky. Other than that, really don't know what else is going to be there. Alright, so let's just jump right into iOS 16. Again, there's not a ton on this right now, but we are probably going to see some design changes to the interface because at least one in the iPhone 14 line is going to be removing the notch, most likely the Pro line. So without the notch, the interface would have to change drastically, thus definitely some design changes on the interface. There's been some whispers of changes to notifications as well, but we don't know exactly what this is going to look like right now. We're also hearing some upgrades to the Health app, so there's going to be better sleep tracking most likely, as well as a medicine management tool, which will allow you to scan in your medications and then keep track of them within the Health app. However, the whispers right now say that this might not be ready by WWDC or by the initial release of iOS 16, so we'll just have to keep an eye on that. Finally, we might see some upgrades to Apple Pay with a buy now, pay later feature similar to Klarna, where you could buy something and then split up the payments among the coming weeks or coming months. Similar to credit cards, but not quite the same way. Another thing that we might see is a new version of a payment program for hardware, which would act similar to their services like Apple Music or Apple Fitness, where you're paying a monthly fee for a piece of hardware rather than having to buy an Apple card and split up the payments that way. Alright, next up is iPadOS 16. So iPadOS generally follows most of the things that iOS has, so expect to see whatever changes on iOS on iPadOS as well, minus a few minor things that only relate to phones. However, we are also hearing some whispers of multitasking upgrades and maybe even a windowing feature, which would make it more usable as a replacement for a laptop. But the big thing that I'm looking for that would make it more of a replacement for a laptop is Pro apps and desktop apps in general. Now, the iPad has had a M1 chip in some models like the iPad Air or the 5th gen iPad Pro since 2020. The M1 chip is the same chip that's used in their desktop machines and their laptops. Whether you're using an M1 base or an M1 Pro or an M1 Max, it's still an M1 chip. So the capability is there for the iPad to run desktop apps, but one of the big hurdles has been interface changes. So recently, Premiere made an update that I really didn't like, but I could kind of read through the lines with. Some of the icons got bigger, some of the menus were moved around to what seemed like illogical places for a Mac, but could be logical places on an iPad. So it looks like Premiere is gearing up for a release on the iPad, as far as I can tell. Now, if Adobe is going to release a full NLE on an iPad, you can bet that Apple is going to beat them to it. So, WWDC may be where we finally see the Apple Pro suite of apps on the iPad, this being Logic, Xcode, and Final Cut. Again, this is rumors, we have no idea, but based on what Adobe has been doing, it's possible. Alright, next up we have WatchOS. Now, I personally use an Apple Watch Series 3 that I've had for a long time. And yes, it's still clinging to life and getting OS updates. However, every time that there's an update, I have to hard reset the watch because as soon as I start using it, it takes up too much space. And then an upgrade is not possible unless I erase everything on it. So I sometimes ignore the updates. I'm not huge on WatchOS right now. I am a watch collector if you've seen some of my other videos, and I love watches, but WatchOS is not the most exciting thing to me because I have such an old watch and can't take advantage of a lot of the features. However, let's cover it anyway. One thing that we're seeing is an improved power saving mode where the Apple Watch would be able to go into a power saving mode that still allows you to use some of the smart functionality. Currently, if you put it on power save, then you only really get to use it as a watch, but we're hearing that there will be some improvements to this. We're also seeing some improvements possibly to aortic fibrillation detection. We'd be able to detect the burden of aortic fibrillation or the amount of time that somebody is in that state. Alright, so that covers the OS updates, but I do want to touch on hardware really quickly. So WWDC is a software event, but occasionally new hardware will be released. Now, the only thing left in the M1 line to be released is a Mac Pro. When the M1 was announced 2 years ago, Apple said that it would be a couple of a year transition period. Well, it's been a couple of years and this is the last piece to get everything up to speed. Now, the Mac Pro would probably not ship with an M1. We just got the Mac Studio, which has two chips together working to make a double chip that really acts as one, but that's still based on the M1. So I would expect to see the first edition of the Mac Pro coming with the M2. Now, unless this M2 is incredibly powerful, we'd probably see chips working in tandem like we do in the Studio. Maybe 2, maybe 4, who knows? And it's possible that because WWDC is software-based, that we won't see the Mac Pro here at all, but I would expect to see it sometime this year. Now, Mac Pros generally run upwards of $10,000 and more. So the people that are buying this are not buying a computer that they're going to upgrade every year. This is typically being bought by pros and companies as a long-term solution. So I would expect to see a chip in here that is so powerful that nothing will beat it for a very long time. On the other end of that, we could see a newly designed MacBook Air. The MacBook Air has not had a redesign since 2018, and even then it was a small redesign, just getting a black bezel and Retina screen. So what we're expecting to see for the next generation of MacBook Air are colors for the case, similar to the iMac, but probably just going to be the base model M2 chip in this. Now, with the M1 chip running the way it does, I would expect that the M2 chip is going to be amazing, but again, we're going to get the base here, whereas if we get it in the Mac Pro, it's going to be insanely good. I have a video coming out soon about what it's like to edit video on an M1 Mac base, which is what I use, so look forward to that. The last thing that we could possibly see hardware-wise at WWDC is a mixed reality headset. Apple's been invested heavily in AR lately, with the iPads first and then iPhones coming with LiDAR sensors, and AR being a heavy focus in some of their apps and their developers' apps. I personally love to play Pokemon Go, and I have been since day one, and the AR features in that have gotten considerably better, but I'd like to see something new, and Apple could be at the forefront of that with this. Now, this headset could be shown here, but it really is not ready for release yet as far as the whispers show, so we're not sure yet. But what we've heard so far is that it will have a wraparound VR headset look. It'll be Oculus Quest style design that's sleek and lightweight, using an Apple Watch style strap and soft mesh around the eyes. It'll have 2 high resolution micro OLED displays, possibly a third display for peripheral vision, a super fast chip that definitely will outperform the M1, maybe we'll have the M2 here, over a dozen cameras for tracking hand movements and viewing the outside world, eye tracking for controls and features based on eye movements, gesture-based controls, and a dedicated app store with focus on gaming, streaming video content, and video conferencing. The bad thing that we're seeing here is an over $3,000 price tag, where the Oculus Quest comes in at, I believe, $300 for the base. So it's going to be expensive. All right, so that about wraps it up. I'm really excited about this event. I watch all of their events live, and I think that this one's going to be a good one. There haven't been as many leaks and rumors this year as there were in previous years, but we'll see what happens. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer as soon as I can. All right, have a great one.